This is 91.3 FM WCOW in Worcester, Massachusetts, the Dr. Chris Radio Horror program. And tonight on Radio Horror, we have a distinguished comic book writer with us who's worked on Marvel and Image and Dynamite. And one of the books that we're having him on the show for, or at least two of the books we're having him on the show for, are Five Ghosts, a story about a man who was possessed by 5 literary ghosts and grant him a unique and unbelievable abilities in his Indiana Jones type escapades. Thank you for coming on the show with us, Frank.
Thank you so much for having me.
Five Ghosts sounds like something that should be turned into a media format of some kind. Seriously. I think it's that good. I think I was at a comic book convention in Marlboro, Super Mega Fest, and I was rummaging through the boxes of Double Midnight Comics, and I was like, immediately saw the artwork, the cover artwork by Ben Templesmith, which always catches my eye, especially if it's something I'm not familiar with. I'm like, what is Five Ghosts? And the guy who runs Double Midnight, Con, Brent, it was just like, it is the best book nobody read.
Oh, my heart. But no, I think we did a launch event at Double Midnight. They're a great store. I know I think I've signed there. I think it was only once I signed there, but I appreciate him pointing that out. And funny enough, the reason I laughed when you said the media stuff is we did have a TV deal in place.
No.
We actually sold it to Universal and Sci-Fi, and it was in development a few years back, but nothing ever came of it. Like, it's a long story that I'm not super privy to talk about, but it's funny because now I see all the comic shows coming out, like Deadly Classroom from my friend Rick Remender, which is fantastic, and I feel like if we had like stuck it out for another year or two, like
maybe it'll happen.
A lot of different like people left different positions there,
right.
And blah blah blah. But
now when you said
we were just ahead of the curve on that one. But
now when you said you sold it, does that mean like you don't have to disclose it? But are we talking about like ching ching?
Not for me. For a lot of other people.
Oh darn! None of our business if you got to check and how much it was. But at least I can buy a car with this.
Here's the ultra spoiler. Like, as the creator, like as someone who wasn't like writing the show or involved, you do not get a cent until they really turn on the camera. That's when they have to actually pay the buyout price.
Right, like Rick Remender, you're seeing him in all the promos for Sci-Fi's Deadly Class, and you know that Rick Remender is getting some bank on that.
Rick show ran and wrote the show, so he really got into a great place. But with us, it was just like we were going to be, I say us, Chris Mooneyham and I were going to be credited as creators, and unfortunately, the sad truth of the world is we would not get anything until literally cameras were on. But again, it was a lot of good exposure for the book in the moment, and even though it didn't work out, like we made a lot of good friends and really got out there well, and hopefully one day. But as I said, we have had the project on hiatus, Five Ghosts, since 2017, and it is something we really want to get back to. We're just waiting for our schedules to align, and it was actually the first book we ever did, so like really out in kind of the public eye. Like, it was our first official release thing as like real creators, which is funny because like I'm super proud of the book, but it was the first thing I ever really wrote that got in front of people. So now I look back and I'm like, oh god, I wish I had been the writer I am now. But we have some more stuff coming, and we love the character, we love the world, and it is ours, which is awesome. As Image, everything you do does belong to you, so we really do look forward to getting back to it and playing more with that world. And quite honestly, like, I feel real confident that the best is yet to come, because both Chris and I, as I said, like, not to repeat myself, but was our first project. So like we've learned so much since then in like 6 years. So one day we will be back. I keep putting a date on it and then looking like an idiot when it doesn't happen. So I'm not saying a date as of now, but we do have stuff ready to go, and we've been talking about it, thinking about it. It's just really waiting for scheduling, because Chris is actually on Nightwing at DC right now. So it is not really tenable to pull him away just yet, but one day I'll get him.
Is that Nightwing? Is that Nightwing with is Tim Seeley still the writer of that?
No, I think a few people have bounced around. I think he came on with Ben Percy, but I think Percy left and Scott Lobdell was on, and I don't know who took over now. But also a good friend, Gary Brown, who also drew issue 6 of Five Ghosts, is on that title as well. So they kind of rotate in and out. So it's like Five Ghost alumni time over there.
Now, the Five Ghosts themselves are a archer, a wizard, right? A private detective, a Sherlock Holmes kind of guy, a samurai, and a vampire, right?
Yes, and really the idea we want to do there is they are, quote, literary archetypes. They are basically Merlin, Robin Hood, Sherlock Holmes, Musashi Miyamoto, and Dracula, but we didn't want to like in the mythology of the book, we didn't want to limit it to like, oh, they are these actual characters. They're more just kind of like spirits that take the form of these archetypes that embody
Right, because otherwise you sound
what
like
they're.
the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen too.
Exactly, yeah, and it's funny because I had done a lot of writing trying to break in before Five Ghosts really clicked. And obviously, I'm a huge nerd. I used to be an English teacher, like, and I love Alan Moore. I love Neil Gaiman, but I didn't want to like come out of the gates with something like that seemed I was really trying to enter into that space. But funny enough, when this book kind of came about pretty organically between me and Chris, like I really just had this idea of we had wanted to do like a period piece, like Indiana Jones type period piece. I was trying to think like how can we, for lack of a better term, like make this more comic booky, like give him some kind of superpower. And I was just thinking, and I remember being like, oh, well, what if he has like super heightened senses like Sherlock Holmes? And I was like, oh, what if he could actually channel Sherlock Holmes? And then I was like, oh, well, what if there were other book characters? And just from there, I was like, okay, how do we make this our own then and spin it out so it isn't just League? And that's why we really like the idea of giving those like towards the end, you see like Vampire Ghost is talking a bit more, and we get a sense that they have their own agendas, that they might be sentient, because we say pretty clearly they are literary spirits that just chose these forms from stories because they embody kind of characteristics of the ghost. So it is something we want to explore more as we unravel a bit more of the mythology. And I know that sounds funny considering the last issue came out like 3 or 4 years ago, but it we really did end on book 3 out of 4 books, so to speak, in terms of a bigger series like architecture. Like the next volume will take us through 25, which will be probably a very big milestone when we get to it, and a big kind of moving forward into the next phase of the story. So I do apologize to everyone who's been waiting, or if you've not read the book. I mean, now's a good time to start catching up because we will get back to it soon. Because we have so the 3 volumes that are out in paperback, and then there's a hardcover that collects volumes 1 and 2, which I think is like getting harder to find. Because honestly, we did the hardcover when we thought the TV show was going to come out, because we're like everyone's going to be rushing to grab this to catch up, and we wanted people to get it in one place. But we didn't print a whole lot of them because they're very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a good find if you are at bookstore or comic book store. I think Amazon might still have some of the hardcovers, and it's a super nice hardcover. We put it all together ourselves. As with everything at Image Comics, we kind of have full say and do all the full design ourselves, along with our designer Dylan Todd. So definitely hunt one down. And I think the first paperback is actually in its 4th printing now. So we are so thankful that people keep discovering the book and going through it. And even as we were just saying, you just picked up the other trades, which I really appreciate. We know we've also released them in France and Spain, or not in Spain, excuse me, in Italy and France, and have a good bit of international following, which is great. So it is something near and dear to us, despite our lack of content over the last few years.
Where did Five Ghosts come about? You said you were an English major. Was it your more idea, or did you guys both collaborate on it?
Well, so Chris and I became friends because I met him when he was still in art school, and I was teaching English at a middle school at the time, and I was kind of in that headspace. And we were actually trying to pitch a book called Endless West that was like a sci-fi western, and just nobody seemed into it. And it looked great. Chris is a fantastic artist and was pretty much fully formed when we just started collaborating. But we just started talking, and I think the first of the Darwin Cook Parker adaptations had come out, and I saw Chris kind of sketching in that style, that very like blocky, like square jawed, like almost vintage pulpy style. I was like, oh, we should do something like this, and we just started talking about things we liked, and I was like, oh, we should do a book about like a thief and Indiana Jones type character, and really just went from there. And as I said, then I had the idea of giving him these ghost powers, and Chris just kind of started sketching, and I think they're in the back of the hardcover. He like just immediately nailed the character design. He's like, he could look like this. I'm like, yep, that's perfect. So I think the actual first portraits of the ghosts he did were what we ended up using. Like if you look in the trade, those little pictures at the bottom that has the 5 archetypes. That's also in our single issues. He just like out of the gate just immediately hit them on the head, and from there it was just kind of deciding on little things in the bigger mythology. But I don't know. It was one of those things where it just hits you like and pretty organically, and it's all based on stuff we like, and a lot of pulling from different fictions, a lot of different books like, say, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Like, I'm not blind to the fact it is similar in ways, and obviously a huge inspiration. So really just taking stuff like that and making it our own. And I feel like as the book did go on, like, and as it goes on further, like growing as a writer and learning more what I want to say with it, what I want to do, and what I think it speaks to is a big priority as well, versus like kind of just diving in and be like, oh, this is going to be like a fun homage to a lot of stuff we like.
You'd also
But,
worked on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, no, go for it, please.
Oh, you had also worked on a series which I think got prematurely canceled, and I don't understand why supernatural stuff doesn't last as long as it does at Marvel. The Howling Commandos, but this time they're actual like monsters.
Yeah, that was a super fun project that really kind of came out of nowhere. And again, it's with Marvel and DC, like it is all always just like numbers driven, and unless it really catches on, they rotate out pretty quick. But that book really was a lot of fun to work on, and I had done so much like planning, like for where we were going to go after the issues that came out. But all in all, I feel like there's one trade of it out that you can find, or just the issues, and we had a lot of fun with it. It was definitely a crazy team, as the crux of it was like Dum Dum Dugan as a life model decoy. Like he kind of finds out he's this like robot clone of the real Dugan and doesn't know what to do with that.
So here's my problem with that series right off the bat. Okay, right. So I liked it, but I'm a massive continuity buff. And the last time we saw Dum Dum Dugan was the Secret Warriors post Secret Invasion series.
Was it the Hickman Bendis one?
Right. And he had been swapped out for a Skrull. So he just like appears with Vanessa, Contessa, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I may not have read every single Marvel book, but when did Dugan die between that and this?
Yeah, there was like a bit of fudging it because again, with a lot of like Marvel and DC assignments, you just take stuff that's handed to you. And Al Ewing, again, a fantastic writer, but he had done like I think some of the initial legwork. There was like there was an issue that he wrote. I can't remember. It's collected in the trade. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was like a one shot, or cannot remember for the life of me what the title was. But it kind of did the like initial establishing, but I really have no idea where in the timeline they said this happened. I mean, in some of the stuff that never got released, I really wanted to like dig into that and like find like old Dugan like super preserved or like aged out, because me giving like Marvel continuity spoilers or the lack thereof, but I cannot remember. I think someone had a plan, but it was more just like, hey, this is a fun idea, let's roll with it. As with so much of that stuff, like they just always want to keep it interesting and find new takes, but sometimes they're more sensitive with the continuity than others. And I'm sorry if that threw you.
Yeah, no.
Again,
just like,
unfortunately,
what
I can't
the
be the one
heck?
to answer, which is maybe a bad look, but what can I do?
And then it's like, Man-Thing kind of just bounces around the Marvel universe, so he doesn't. I mean, I'm not really hung up on his continuity, so he can appear anywhere.
Someone was like super salty because like I guess the last time we had seen Man-Thing, like he could talk and stuff, and I was like, nah, not that.
Yes, R.L. Stein wrote a miniseries where Man-Thing could talk. Yeah. So and it was like R.L. Stein's first comic book when that came out, and people were like really excited. I eventually read it. I was like, this is okay. The backup features were much better, I think, because they were all like standalone little horror stories, which were a couple of them were very kind of creepy. And you're like, ooh, R.L. Stein. But there was one character you used in that, which I absolutely loved, is the I think she's called the Vampire by Night.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I wish Marvel would use her more. I love that character.
I had to do a lot of like research. Again, not that I was being so tight with continuity, but like I had never heard of some of these people, like her being one of them, and like Warwolf as well, and like really see like what they were even about. But she was a really cool character, and it was fun to kind of play with. It was a hard book because there were 9 people on the team, and like team books, you always try to have to find someone to be like the in. So in my narcissism, I created a character to use as kind of our into that. But the character Glyph, who actually was supposed to be my take on the Living Mummy, because I guess Marvel had lost the rights to the Living Mummy, so I couldn't use that.
How do you lose rights to a character you created when mummies are not copywritten?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know how that works exactly, but they're like, you can't use living mummies. So I'm like, all right, I'll make a new mummy character, and that kind of gave me the idea to have Jesus, it's been so long I forget his name, but the bad guy, Sphinx, who is the bad guy. I'm like, oh, let's do like a kind of Egyptian themed first arc, but really the fun of that was like I really wanted to get like Blade back in. I really wanted to do like old Ghost Rider and really play in like the kind of horror Marvel space, but alas, the book did not.
Yeah, the book got
last long
canceled
enough for
when
that,
they
but,
did the standoff, which was the kicking off point for the Captain America turning into a Nazi storyline.
yeah, it's so funny that like I was privy to so many of those earlier plot beats, like when we were doing standoff planning, and Nick Spencer, who is a great writer and a really like again big thinker, like was planting so much of that stuff as we went along, and it was really interesting to be at the front of that with the event. But then kind of like at that point, like after Commandos, I kind of drifted away from Marvel. I've not drifted back since, but it was really fascinating to be privy to that like huge macro planning, because they plan a lot of stuff very far in advance, and I knew where some of it was going, and watching like varying degrees of fan reception is always interesting when you're kind of behind the curtain. But I was happy with our standstill issue. That was a fun bit to do. It, if like a little bit weird to end the series, because we were not obviously planning to end the series there, but word came down like, oh, 6 will be the last one. So that's why the last few pages are just kind of like this inserted epilogue of like, and by the way, like we're back together and one day we'll make this dream work. Howling Commandos forever. The end. Which again, you try to tie things up the best you can when you get that hand dealt, I guess. But no, I really just have to praise the artist Brent Schoonover, who did all 6 of those issues just like at breakneck speed and great quality. He was an awesome collaborator. I think he still does stuff at Marvel. I know he's pretty active as an artist, but he was great, as well as the colorist Nick Filardi, who just colored the new Umbrella Academy, I believe, and a lot of other stuff. I think he might actually color some of the Nightwing that Chris is working on. But no, that was a super fun project that I think had a lot of promise, and it is just so hard to find staying power. But I was so interested in the thing we were doing is like we had Dracula like under the castle, and I really loved this idea that this division of S.H.I.E.L.D. had been developing technology all mined from Dracula's body. Like you see Dracula at one point, and he's all like rigged up with tubes, and I just thought that was like a fun, if like macabre like way, like, oh, like this tech we invented, it's actually like biological weaponry we've mined from Dracula. And obviously the crux of the book down the line would have been like Dracula breaking out and being like, you dirty S.H.I.E.L.D. agents have been literally taking my body apart, like, and the team would fight Dracula, which I would have thought would be a pretty fun and natural.
Now the Avengers are fighting Dracula in the actual Avenger title.
That's what I saw. I'm like, oh, look, it always comes back. But I do love Jason Aaron, and I feel like he is a fantastic writer, so I'm curious to see where he goes. I thought like Blade is there now, right? Like,
Yeah,
I think
Blade's
Blade
a member of the Avengers because they needed a vampire hunter on the team. They have a demon from hell. They have a sorcerer they can call on once in a while. Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange leaving when he left or whatever, because he was just like, I can't be on the Avengers full time, guys, but I'm gonna recommend somebody who fights supernatural stuff better than I can. That's gonna be a great asset to the team. And I was like, who is that gonna be? And then it turns out to be Blade. But the other thing I just wanted to point out is I wasn't sure if you're aware that at this time there was also the Monsters Underground thing, where like Morbius was living underground with like a bunch of other monsters.
Yeah, I think.
But which, by the way, is supposed to be in New York. Is that above or below where the dinosaurs are living that Kraven the Hunter was fighting with Stegrod over in Venom, or is that in California? I can't. I cannot. There's all these underground factions of creatures living. Oh, what about the Mole Man? Where does the Mole Man live?
The Marvel universe has a pretty dense underground.
There's no Earth core. It's just a bunch of underground.
It just keeps going, so you don't even know what they.
And you know this underground monster thing actually was still existing at this time, because over in Deadpool's married to the Queen who runs this underground.
Oh, that's right. Isn't that where like Orgo came from? I read so much weird continuity like stuff. Oh, I feel like was Elsa Bloodstone in that book? Because I really wanted to put Elsa Bloodstone.
The girl Bloodstone chick.
Yeah, the girl.
Yeah. Who they went from like her looking like her dad with like, you know, the blonde hair and like the open shirt, whereas he's got this huge manly chest, so they draw her with like giant, you know, pectoral female muscles, let's just call them for radio play. But then they completely switched her over to this very Laura Croft kind of red hair look when the Secret Wars was happening, when she was like, it was her fighting the Marvel zombies in one of the battle worlds, and you're like, wow, they really completely redesigned that character. And now she's
Sure.
running. Last time I saw her, she was running around with the kid Inhuman that could draw the monsters from the Monsters Unleashed storyline. When Marvel was pumping out Inhuman crap like crazy because they didn't have X-Men rights, they were like, hey, let's just do Inhumans every five. Kids like Inhumans, right? No, we don't. Stop it. Stop it.
I feel like I got Elsa Bloodstone into issues of Avengers World. I did because there was the first stuff I did at Marvel was 2 issues of Avengers. Well, the Doctor Strange New Avengers Annual, which again, if you are a horror fan, I feel like that issue is beautifully painted, and I feel like has some cool horror elements to it. It's New Avengers Annual #1 from like 2014.
Yeah,
we were
there's
talking
many New Avengers Annuals #1.
Yeah, it's hard to. It's the Doctor Strange one. It's beautifully painted by an artist named Marco Rudy, who's fantastic. The gig I immediately did after that was 2 issues of Avengers World with Nick Spencer, where the whole gist of the story was that like Mr. Fantastic's daughter was recruiting a kind of B team of Avengers because I can't remember what event it was writing into. It was Rick's event. God, what was it? Where Axis, where the good Avengers were all bad, so she recruits this B team of Avengers, and Elsa Bloodstone was on the team. So it was 2 issues of this weird B team, but it was a fun thing. And I actually love Valeria Richards, and if anything from the stuff I did at Marvel, I got to have her wearing like this like giant suit of Doctor Doom armor and fighting with them, which I thought was fun. So that run was great because it was with Marco Cacchetto, who is actually doing the Daredevil book now, who's an awesome artist, and I'm loving the Daredevil he's doing right now. So he's been a great artist for a long time, but was glad to have him on those issues when I did them.
Now, where did you first get your start in comics? How did you break in?
So funny enough, like I said, Five Ghosts was really the first thing that broke through and was very, very fortunate.
Was that the first thing you did?
I wasn't the first thing I tried to do. It was the first thing that came out. Well, actually, you know what? A year prior, I'd done a short story in a Dark Horse anthology, Dark Horse Presents.
The Buffy thing?
What was that?
The Buffy short?
No, I have never done a Buffy short, but it was,
okay, because Dark Horse Presents is listed on your site, and I thought maybe you worked on the Buffy, because there's like a Buffy image here from when they were doing Buffy.
Yeah, one of the covers, that was probably the lead story, but I did a book called The White Suits, which started as shorts in Dark Horse Presents.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the first like official thing published. I had I spent like 4 years like really trying to break into comics and like self-publishing and just doing like little cash cans. And at the end of that, I mean, that sounds long, but I was very fortunate that I really honed it. It was moving fast, all things considered, but it was really just Five Ghosts that we self-published. We did a little Kickstarter for it in 2013. I remember we got like $2,000, if that, but it was what helped us, because we were doing it by ourselves completely. It helped us finish it up for New York Comic Con, I guess.
Do you know who has the highest grossing Kickstarter for a comic book?
Is it God Hates Astronauts, Ryan Brown, or
no? It is Brian Pulido, the creator of Lady Death, and it is Lady Death herself. No. The last Kickstarter, there's one going on right now, which goes for I think for a couple more weeks, but the last one did over $275,000.
Oh my gosh!
For a comic book,
a little bit more than our $2,000.
Yeah, I mean, can you believe that? I mean, Lady Death, and you're like, wow.
Is it for like a single book, or are they like issues that they?
It's like every Kickstarter for Lady Death does like better than the last one. And he did like
fans are out there, man.
He did a couple for like a new character he created called La Muerta, which was very successful. And he just did his first very heavy adult themed one where like Lady Death, I wouldn't say is appropriate for children, but it definitely is okay for teenagers and tiptoes the line with the cheesecake and the TNA. But his new book, Hell Witch, is like, holy good God. It is like nudity. There's violence. There is the talk of like they go into like great description of like what the events that take place that are mature content material type stuff. You have to check out to see what I'm talking about. He's got all sorts of great artists that worked on it. Ken Hunt, if you've ever met him.
No, I'm trying to think. Like it sounds so familiar, and
He's done a lot of like little various covers here and there. He actually worked on a cover for my comic book. I have a comic book, which issue 1 has been completed, where I'm waiting for issue 2 and 3 to kind of get started. I can't go into too much detail about what's going on with that, but the comic book is we take the entire story of Dracula and gender swap the cast.
Oh, that's awesome.
Now, certain things have changed too. You cannot adapt Dracula's novel as it is into a medium. Like, I give a lot of credit to John Cassidy, who did it recently. He did like the covers for it with like a couple other people for Dynamite, but the book was kind of boring because Dracula is kind of a boring novel.
Is it the Bram Stoker one of it, or
it was the Dynamite one?
But is it adapted from the text, the Bram Stoker? Okay.
Yeah. That's why Dracula has never been adapted like the way people will always complain, going, why do they add that to, like, that's not in the novel? It's like, because the novel's kind of boring. you need to add stuff to Dracula and like change some stuff around and make it more susceptible for modern audiences. You know what I mean? And I've done that with my own, but I also take a lot of homages from like Castlevania and Fright Night and the Hammer horror movies into my story.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'll send you a link.
Can you say the title of it?
Yeah, I will send you the link to the Twitter, and you can check out all the different artwork that's up on it.
Oh, very cool.
But back to you.
Wow.
So that's good that Five Ghosts was a big success. One book you did that I'm not familiar with whatsoever is Violent Love.
So yeah, that is my most recent book that I did. I guess already 2 years ago. It's been a minute, but it was another Image series, and it was with one of my favorite artists to collaborate with and just read his stuff, Victor Santos, who actually wrote the book Polar, which was adapted recently on Netflix to that movie with Mads Mikkelsen. That is Victor's book Polar. So he did this book Violent Love with me. He's my co-creator and did all of the art. He drew it, inked it, colored it. So it was really just the two of us. And it is a crime romance story that spans the 70s and 80s and tells a based on a true story but not really story of two kind of notorious criminals who kind of fall in love and their kind of rise and fall and what happens to them. And again, I really like it. I mean, I'm biased because I wrote it, but I also love Victor's art, and he really, I think, took things to the next level. He's just a phenomenal artist who knows how to use the medium. Comics, is great with emotion, great with action, great with drawing, really beautiful people, and just like, again, we have a really cool, strong female lead named Daisy Jane in the series. It's really her story as we learn about her life and kind of what turned her into a criminal and where she ends up. And again, it was really a blast. If you're into it at all, if that sounds appealing, if you like crime comics, both are on Amazon. It's a 10-issue story, so it's in 2 volumes. But yeah, it was a blast to do. And again, I've been a little quiet over the last few years, but we are working on some new stuff together as well. But he has had a gangbusters year with Polar coming out, so I'm really proud of his stuff. And again, we also did another book together called Black Market at Boom Studios originally, which was a short pitch like Breaking Bad with superheroes, so to speak, but a little more than that. But that is the short sell, I guess. But he is a fantastic artist, so if you like crime, if you like romance, if you like, I don't know, just like pseudo like 70s like pulpy crime stuff, I would definitely recommend checking it out, as it was a book that I was very proud of.
The one thing that you worked on that I have to begrudge you, and it's not your fault, I completely understand.
Well, if it is my fault, it's cool too. I'll take it.
How freaking dare you contribute to that god-awful version of Lobo that DC was trying to push out?
No,
what
please
the
do,
heck?
Please do berate me for that. That was you do some gigs because you love them, you do some because you need money.
Oh my god. You know what happened to that version of Lobo, right? I think he got squished.
Yeah, by real Lobo when he came back, right?
Yeah,
well, again, and
Brainiac.
Cullen, who was writing that comic book, is a fantastic writer and buddy, and they kind of called me. We're like, hey, we need someone to work from Cullen's plots and do these. I'm like, you know what? I'm not too proud. I will gladly do it. And it was funny because like, it was such a wild take on the character. I mean, I give them credit for trying to shake things up, but
it's
you
like
quickly
at a time
learn
when everyone
what
was
fans
doing
want
that
and what fans don't want. And I think pretty viscerally, that was not something that fans were into. But
it's definitely not against you, Frank.
Quite honestly, I pretended I was writing Wolverine the whole time and didn't really look at it. So I was like, well, how can I make him sound like Wolverine? I think at one point I had written him saying like in my draft and forgot to take it out, like, I'm the best there is at what I do, or whatever Wolverine says. And they were like, yeah, he can't say that. And I was like, yeah, sorry guys, I'm pretending I'm writing Wolverine. I stuck it through that. But I don't even think all of that was collected in trade, people hated it so much.
It's definitely not your fault. I think it is definitely editorial of DC Comics, because you look at the time period that happened in. Over in video games, they put out the new Devil May Cry with Dante, and he looked just like this version of Lobo. Superman was also turned that way too from the New 52, which was like, good God, what have they done to Superman? And thankfully we've brought him back to the way we love him, and now he's a father too. So if you're a dad, you can relate to Superman a lot more. Stuff like that. But this version of Lobo, yeah, he the last time I saw him was when the Rebirth happened, before Grant Morrison's Green Lantern current storyline. Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps, Brainiac had captured the Green Lanterns and shrunk down the miniature Lobo. This Lobo, the goth emo Lobo. And then you're right. I think he got killed by the one that we know and love, who, by the way, is going to appear on Krypton soon.
Oh, no way! That's
supposedly this is how
funny, but
this is how Superman's great grandfather gets out of the Phantom Zone. He meets a criminal of the Phantom Zone who happens to be Lobo.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, so it's supposed to be the second season is supposed to be about the. So you were hoping that there's some new Five Ghosts coming out. What was a comic book you grew up reading, and what's a character you would love to write right now?
So funny enough, the first comic I ever read that got me into comics was X-Men 2099. So when Marvel did their 2099 line, that is. Are we still good? Or?
Yeah, they were still good. I was just making fun of you saying I'm sorry.
I was in
because you're the first person I've ever heard say that about X-Men 2099.
It was definitely pretty wild and all over the place, but it was the book that taught me what monthly comics were. I would go every month and buy it at the store. And characters I want, right? Batman, obviously, but I think that's everybody. But,
right, yeah.
I really do love Fantastic Four. I love modern Fantastic Four, which is weird. John Hickman, again, I was fortunate enough to write into his Avengers run. I really like his stuff, and his Fantastic Four was just very, very good. I like a lot of places he took the team. But again, I'm a weirdo. I like making my own stuff as well, and I really just kind of shoot more for genres at this point. What's something I haven't done or something I'd like to experiment more in. And I'm trying to think of because I'm working on a whole bunch of stuff to kind of do over the next year or two. And the big thing I'm working on is my own superhero project, because I had kind of said to myself, I don't want to launch my own superhero stuff unless I find a really unique, interesting take that isn't just my own crappy Watchmen or something. And I think I really did find something.
That should be the title. Cobra. My own crappy Watchmen.
Maybe we can brand the book like that. You loved it when Alan Moore did it. You'll hate it when I do it. My own crappy Watchmen.
If you, as long as you call it a parody, nobody can sue you. Think about that. If you want to make it a parody superhero book, you can get away with that title as long as you actually put it in a parody. Then DC Comics will be like, damn it, he put that in our subtitle. We can't sue him. All the millions he probably has from that upcoming Five Ghost deal.
I'm very into this timeline, so we'll get there.
All right.
but no, thank you so much for having me, and again, give me a second to plug my wares. But Five Ghosts is a book near and dear to my heart, and I am glad people are still discovering it. And again, we will be jumping back in sooner than later, and it is a story we care about and want to keep telling. So we thank everyone who's been holding on, and hope there's plenty of people we will find along the way as well to become new fans.
Again, my hat's off to Brent for introducing me to it. Again, saying it was the best book that nobody was reading, and I was so glad to find out there was more than 5 issues. I was like, what? I always thought there was only 5 issues, and now I'm like, yay!
And well, thank you so much, and thanks for checking it out.
Definitely.